Today I'm going to preview Oklahoma's game against South Dakota with John Thayer, and all that's coming up after the bumper.
What do you mean you don't subscribe to my son's YouTube channel?
Mama, no!
Just snap the damn ball, RJ.
What's up, kinfolk? It's RJ Young. I am not on a step mill. Consider hitting the like and subscribe button because I upload a video every single day. It's always OU related, college football related, sports related. We have a good time, and today we're going to talk about Oklahoma's game against South Dakota. South Dakota, mascot, Coyotes, FCS opponent. Also, really bad last year, 4-7, but they returned some guys that they liked. They had their opener against Montana, and it didn't go as planned. Before that game, the Coyotes had won 16 straight home openers. They lost that game 31-17. They gave up more than 400 yards passing to Dalton Sneed. Austin Simmons, their quarterback, acquitted himself well. Cody Case, wide receiver, had 11 catches for 144 yards. They have an All-American playing in the defensive end, and they got a coordinator in Travis Johansson who was like Alex Grinch in his first year. He was playing what they called a positionless defense, and that positionless defense gave up 400 yards through the air. No one expects this one to be close, but I really did want to do a good job with this. So rather than just me talking for 7, 12, 20 minutes or whatever about Oklahoma, which I do a lot, I wanted to bring in sideline reporter John Thayer to give us his best analysis for what this team is, what they expect when they travel to Oklahoma later this week, and how the landscape looks for FCS teams. Remember, this is South Dakota, not South Dakota State. South Dakota State is just a juggernaut, and North Dakota State is the juggernaut. But anyway, they play in the Summit League, which I thought was really interesting, which means that South Dakota does travel to Oral Roberts on occasion. We talked a little bit more about that. All right, now I'm going to throw it to John. All right, so I'm joined by USD sideline reporter John Thayer. John, how you doing, man?
I'm good. Football season finally here, so little different hop in the step, if you know what I mean.
I absolutely do. I appreciate you taking the time to do this with me. I only know about Coyotes football from what I read, and that this is really helpful to not just me, but I hope to the community. And I hope are you traveling? Are you coming down?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. We go to Tulsa every year for basketball.
Okay.
So for Oral Roberts, they're in the same Summit League, and we all compete in that. So we go there once a year. But I've never been to Norman, and I grew up in the state of Nebraska. I'm probably going to get in trouble for saying this, but I grew up in the state of Nebraska, and back in the time when Nebraska-Oklahoma was a big rivalry. So I know how OU is a little bit with their environment, but I've never been to it, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Oh, right on. We'll have to catch up then when you get down here, because we're also excited about getting Nebraska back to Norman in a couple of years. I think the rivalry starts up again in 2021. So they signed a home and home, so that'll be fun. But I want to talk about South Dakota and Oklahoma. I understand that this is being called a paycheck game for you guys, but I wonder what the mood is like there, just as you're getting ready for football season, knowing you had this thing on the schedule for some time now.
Well, I think what it is, honestly, it's like there's excitement. I think there's a lot of fans that are going to go to it. I think for these athletes, when they get the chance to play in some of these bigger stadiums and bigger environments, it's pretty neat. This game, I can't remember when it was put on the schedule, a couple of years ago here or whatever. David Herbster, the athletic director, he told me, he said, we're going to make an announcement on our guarantee game. And he said, you're going to think I'm crazy. And when it came out, I just kind of like, wow, not that a lot of these games you get are easy for an FCS program or anything like that, but Oklahoma every year it's a contender. It seems like every single year. So you knew it's different than going to Kansas State like we did last year. It's different than going to Bowling Green like we did a couple of years ago. So it's just a whole different animal, and it's exciting. We did a lot of recruiting area in Missouri and Kansas, and so it's kind of a regional area for some of these guys who have been in the program a couple of years to, play, whether maybe they didn't grow up an Oklahoma fan necessarily, but, familiar because of the territory they grew up.
Are there a couple of guys that you're excited to see play ball this year at South Dakota?
Yeah, definitely. And one of them is, I'll give you both sides of the ball, a couple of things. Austin Simmons, the quarterback. Really excited to see what he does in year 2 as the starter. He took over as the starter last year. Kind of was he was good. If you actually look at his stats, despite the team's record, if you look at just the quarterbacks in the conference, he had like the 3rd highest completion percentage. He had one of the top, if not the top, yards passed per game and total yards thrown for. And so he was really good, but the offensive line struggled a little bit. And they got injured early in the season, unfortunately. So he dealt with some new guys up front, and I'm excited to see. I think he's more confident in that offensive line and just kind of what he brings. He's got just a rocket of an arm. He can throw the football long ways and do it accurately. He runs the ball decent, not great, but he runs the ball decent. So I'm excited for him. Dakota Allen, he'll wear number 82, wide receiver. This guy's got big-time playmaking ability. Like he had a catch 2 years ago in the spring game that ended up on ESPN's top 10 plays. And we've seen it a couple of times from him. He can just go get the football. So he's fun to watch. And then defensively, I mean, you'll hear a lot leading up to the game about Darren Greenfield, an All-American. This is the guy who came to USD as a walk-on, has since earned a scholarship, and just has been an animal up front. And with a new defensive coordinator, I'm really excited to see what his role will be and then what he can do in this defense. So those are some of the guys that, you look at going into the season that really are going to have to be good.
What does the scheme look like on each side of the ball?
Well, on offense, it's a fast-paced, it's an up-tempo offense. They'll spread out sometimes 4 or 5 wide receivers, and they want to get on the football. USD's kind of adapted like a lot of teams are. And, it used to be that you run 60 plays, and that was a good day. Now, if you're under 80, you're almost too slow. So USD's going to run a lot of plays, and they're going to get up there. They've got a depth at running back. They've got really good depth at wide receiver. I don't know how many they'll travel at each position, but I mean, there's not going to be probably a standout running back. There's going to be probably 8 or 9, maybe 10 wide receivers that play in some of the games this year. So they do a lot of things on offense. And then defense, it's all new for us. Travis Johansson became the defensive coordinator this year. He was at Grandview University, an NAIA school in Des Moines, Iowa. And he comes, and they're calling it basically a positionless defense with multiple looks.
Okay.
And you're basically going to have a couple of players that maybe are a safety that might appear more like a linebacker at times in the scheme, and they might look like a safety in some of the scheme. And I think some of those guys up front, the DNs and stuff, on how they drift back to maybe line up like a linebacker versus having a hand in the ground kind of thing. So, it's new for us to see this defense, and I'm excited to see how it looks. And, anytime you make a coordinator change, I think all fans get intrigued by what it's going to look like.
Well, we got a little bit of that going on at Oklahoma, having hired Alex Grinch in January to run the defense after Riley let go Mike Stoops after some years at Oklahoma. And quite frankly, the defense has been abysmal in the last couple of years at OU. And one of the things that I've criticized the defense about is that anybody can come in here as a quarterback and get their Heisman tape. Because this is the defense that gave up 361 yards passing to Zeb Nolan, who's going to quarterback at NDSU this year. And I was just going, man, what happens if South Dakota comes through here and puts up 45? Is anybody going to take that as a win? I think they should. I also think that, if you're Oklahoma and that happens, you don't feel really good about much of anything because we're so used to watching the offense having to outscore people to win football games. So a track meet doesn't necessarily make anybody feel good in Norman. How would a track meet make you guys feel in South Dakota?
Well, that's kind of what it's been the last few years, and that's kind of what led to a defensive coordinator change. I think kind of like Oklahoma, I guess, similar in that regard. I mean, different scales, different levels, whatever, but similar. Last year, just giving up, they couldn't stop the run was the problem for USD. You could not slow down the run at all, and you just can't have that, and you run out of gas when you're trying to outscore people all the time. They play the played a 3 overtime game at Indiana State last year. Just could not slow down their running quarterback. Dual threat quarterbacks were a pain for USD last year defensively, quite honestly. If there was a dual threat quarterback, you were almost more worried about what they were going to do on the ground than throwing the football. And that was a big problem for them. And Indiana State has a guy who played at Iowa, Ryan Boyle, and he's obviously been good for Indiana State. So that's one of the things that they want to go away from, because 2 years ago when USD made the playoffs for the first time at the Division I level in 2017, it was outscore everybody. That's basically what you had to do, and they had an offense that could do that. They had a quarterback who is now the starting quarterback for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, Chris Stredler, who could help. He could throw the ball really, really well. He could run the ball, and he was as dangerous as anybody running the football. And he'd be the quarterback that most coaches don't like, because he'd take off running with the ball, look linebacker in the eyes, and try to run him home. And you don't like to see that with your starting quarterback too often. And it cost him a few games in his 2-year career at USD, but he was willing to do that because he also earned respect, for that. But they outscored teams in 2017 that helped get to the playoffs in some of those games. And I think USD believes that it can score points in most of its games this year, and its offense will move the ball. They just need to take some of the pressure off of the offense this year with better defensive play.
I'm going to give you a bit of a double-barreled question, but I think you'll know where I'm going with this. Does South Dakota play a lot of games on television, and if they don't, do you think that FBS teams have trouble scouting them from time to time?
We're actually really fortunate as far as television coverage is concerned, because there's a regional network that televises pretty much every home game, and it's Midco Sports Network, and so everything is on ESPN Plus or ESPN3 or whatever. It's just, this is a world where you don't hide. There's video of everything everywhere. Even some of the really small colleges and stuff, they at least have an internet video of some sort. I don't think scouting them becomes a problem for FBS schools, because FBS schools can find a way if they want to get taped somehow, some way. But yeah, all they did, the season openers on Midco SN. I think every home game actually is on the regional network. So we get used to that flow, which is good, because you go to some of the bigger schools, and sometimes, depending on what network is involved, the only difference is the length of TV timeouts or whatever, and sometimes that is a little bit longer when we go into these type of games. But yeah, they do get to be on TV, and I think this one's different. Just because this is the second game of the year. It's not like it's the first game of the year. So Travis Johansson, the new defensive coordinator, his stuff's going to be on tape for Oklahoma because of game one, a lot better than it would be if this was the season opener.
Right, and I was actually giving that some thought, but no, I'm glad. I'm sorry. That led me to my next question, which is follow up to that, which is, as a guy that covered enough NAIA sports to understand the difference, have you ever been big-timed by guys that cover larger teams and they ask you the dumbest questions? And if they did, can you tell me a story? You don't have to name anybody's name or even tell me the region, but I wonder, how does this feel for someone like you who's busting butt? And quite frankly, you got to work harder than I do, because all the information for me is readily available from just a standpoint of, we were making a joke about the depth chart being released at Oklahoma here just a couple of minutes ago. But it's not like I would have to look hard to find that kind of stuff, whereas you might have to work a little bit harder.
Actually, I suppose that's maybe a thought that people have that have never covered this level or whether, but it's not Division II. It's not NAIA. It is Division I football. It's maybe, whether you want to call it 1AA or FCS versus FBS or whatever, it is Division I football, and it's treated that way. Okay. I mean, the sports information directors do a tremendous job And we have everything that we need. And if there's not something available, all it takes is a phone call or a text message, in today's world, and you can get that information. And we are very fortunate here. I think we've got a bunch of people that want to, USD made this transition here not that long ago, obviously. And as they continue to build, they are seeing now as they put buildings on campus. We got a new basketball arena that opened in 2016. They're renovating the Dakota Dome where the football team plays right now. So one side of that's going to be pretty much brand new next season. But as they make changes with facilities, you do that to win and you do that to recruit. But you have to take the other parts of your athletic department and you have to make those Division I as well. And they've done that with sports information and some of the others. And so the information is there for the most part. And you know what? Bob Nielsen, the coaching staff, they're no different than any other coaching staff. They're going to release what they're allowed to, and for some coaches, the minimum that they have to. And sure, you might have to look a little bit harder on some of that stuff, but for the most part, I mean, you get game notes, you get a 2D, you get stories written. There's a few media outlets that I think South Dakota might be different than some places like, for example, like Indiana State, where Indiana State might get lost a little bit in the shuffle. South Dakota is unique because there are these South Dakota and South Dakota State are the two Division I universities in this state. And so there's a lot of emphasis. And if you look at I think we're spoiled for women's basketball because I've done the radio for them for 7 years, and it's pretty cool to see 3,000 fans at a game, or to see how much interest there is. Where I'll go to some of these other places, even some of the bigger schools, and women's basketball is kind of an afterthought. So I think South Dakota is a little bit unique in that regard because it's, you look at it in Tulsa, maybe Tulsa or Oklahoma State overshadow Oral Roberts a little bit. I think we're unique in that way that we don't have that because we don't have the other universities in the state. Not to say that there aren't obviously Nebraska fans here because there are a ton, Iowa State, Minnesota. But I think it is a little bit unique in that regard.
Is there something that I'm trying to think of the best way to ask my fundamentally stupid question. So I'm just going to ask my fundamentally stupid question. But before I do, my bookie is sponsoring this video, which is very cool. I would only recommend a service to my listeners that's proven. That's why my bookie is always the right play. You bet, you win, they pay. My bookie lets you bet on which college coaches will get fired, who will make the college football playoff, and the Heisman Trophy. You can even bet on halftime lines, live odds, or FBS versus FCS games like this one, OU versus South Dakota. Up to $1,000 on your first deposit bonus. Double your first deposit. Use the promo code RJ to activate the offer. Visit MyBookie online today. That's MYBOOKIE. And don't forget to use the promo code RJ. Again, it's my name, RJ, no periods. And when creating your account to claim the bonus, use promo code RJ. Bet, win, get paid. When the fans travel, what are some of the traditions that they bring with them?
There'll be, just like for tailgating purposes, there'll be a couple of, RVs or bus type things that are put together that, that people go on the road with. We travel, some games you travel with more than others. It just kind of depends. A game like this, there'll be a decent amount. But some of those are also, you look at the regional kids and their families can get to that game a little bit easier than they can to maybe some of the games in Vermilion, actually. And so you'll see some of that stuff, but I don't know if I really got anything good for you on that.
No, it's interesting because, everybody's got their thing. And if you don't ask about their thing, you walk into it not knowing. And there are a lot of folks that watch this channel, that listen to me on the radio in Tulsa, that do tailgate like there's no tomorrow out at Norman, and I know they're going to be really welcoming to anybody that wants to show up from South Dakota to the game. If for no other reason than, it's going to be nice to meet different people from different parts of the country that love football.
Yeah. I mean, their flags will be up just like a regular tailgate. They'll have beer in their hand like a regular tailgate. All that stuff. We do it all here.
Well, I was about to say, is the weather going to be a factor, do you think? Because it's been up around 90 here with some humidity from time to time heading into September.
I think that's actually a really good question. And I don't know the answer because we've had, outside of a couple of days, our August has been really a lot cooler than normal, I would say. We've had a lot of days, leading up to these first couple of weeks of the season where the high has been in the mid to upper 70s. And usually August is a pretty warm month, but outside of a couple of days. So I'd say most of fall camp, I mean, these guys, it's not like they're dealing with a ton of heat or anything like that. It's just a weird year in that way. So I don't know. That's a good question. They'll play. They play their first. The first game of the year is at home. Obviously, it's inside a building where it's a controlled temperature, controlled environment. Play on turf there. They've got turf outside that they practice on when they prepare for road games, and so it just kind of depends. But I think that'll be extra emphasized by the strength and conditioning staff and whatnot to make sure they're hydrating in a different way. Because you're right, it's a good point. I didn't really think about it. I haven't even watched the weather in that area, but I think even me on the sidelines, I better start drinking some extra water and Gatorade and stuff so that I can be hydrated because it'll be different.
Man, I hope not. I was Monday here. It was heat index was like 100. And
hopefully by 6 o'clock in a nighttime kickoff, hopefully we'll see the temperature drop a little bit at some point. The sun goes, usually, I don't know if it's like that there, but around here when the sun goes down, you feel like a temperature drop real quick. That's when it almost went to the other, I play in golf league and the sun dropped. We were kind of slow one night. The sun goes down. You almost need to put on pants and a coat.
Oh, man. I wish. Yeah. If it gets below 80 around about 6 or 7 o'clock, I would count us lucky up here, man, or down here, I should say. No, are there questions that you had about Oklahoma that I can answer for you?
I think a lot of the questions, just on I think a lot of people want to see the defense,
okay,
and how that looks with a new defensive coordinator. I mean, they came out. I kind of laughed a few weeks ago. They tweeted out that Jalen Hurts was named the starting quarterback at Oklahoma. And I just kind of thought, well, outside of Lincoln Riley kind of feeding us full of some stuff, was there ever actually a battle? Was anybody concerned that Jalen Hurts was not going to be the starting quarterback? But I get it. You go through the process and give the other guys a chance and stuff. And I'm excited to watch him play. This is good for him. I think I've watched that whole thing kind of unfold from afar, and I thought he handled it tremendously well, better than most anybody can. This situation at Alabama. And then first chance that he had where he could go somewhere else and play right away, I mean, he saw the writing on the wall. He knew what the situation was, and I thought he handled that very well. So I'm excited to see him play.
No, and I think you nailed it. Nobody here was shocked. If anything, I was saying, hey, why are you wasting everybody's time? Just give the guy the job so that everybody can rally around him and he can go do his thing. But Lincoln has his process. He has these dates when he's going to announce his quarterback. They announce their quarterback. I think the really interesting thing about this season for him is I was always just working with the assumption that he was a team captain at Alabama at one point, at some point or another. And this was the first time that he'd ever been named team captain of Alabama or Oklahoma. So this is his first and last opportunity to really legitimately lead a team in more than just the quarterback role. And I was astounded by that for a number of reasons, not the least of which is you've been on campus for all of 8 months and you've earned everybody's respect. But more than that, they expect you to lead them. They expect you to try to take them to a place they haven't been, a place Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray couldn't take them, which is a win in a college football playoff semifinal. I think everybody's pulling for him, and that's what's unique. Is I haven't seen this many people just really want one player on a football team to do so very well who didn't come back from injury. You know, it's usually one of those. It's usually this guy came back from a horrific injury, and we all want to see him just go out there and have a good time. And with Hurts, you got guys from, like, there are folks from Alabama that just dropped through to say, hey, I'm just here to say you guys got a good one, and we can't wait to see what he does at Oklahoma. Probably root against him if you ever have to play Alabama in the playoff, but outside of that, we would all like to see him succeed. And I think I think we're in a moment right now where there are a couple quarterbacks where you look at him and you're like, hey, if that guy wants to run for office, I think he could win, and I think everybody would be fine with it. And right now, I think Hurts is up there. And that's speaking volumes, especially for a guy that has very little personality in front of media. Like, he just ain't into it, but he carries himself in such a way where you can't fault him. You can't say that he's just being standoffish. He just is who he is. And we're always going to honor someone who's being authentic with us.
Yeah, I think that's cool. I think a lot of people want to see, those people succeed over and over. I'm curious, what do you think the feeling is for a game like this against a team, South Dakota? I mean, I know that there's a lot of areas where there's FBS football and they don't want to see these FCS games. And they probably don't understand how important it is for an athletic budget or anything like that. But even if it was, SEC, a lot of times they'll have these games in November. Deep in their schedule. A lot of them, when we go places, most of the time it's the first game of the year.
Right.
But this is the second game of the year. I think it's different. I'm not going to call it like a trap game because I don't think it is. Like Oklahoma should beat South Dakota and it shouldn't be close. And I think we'd all agree on that. I think that South Dakota is going to go there with the mindset of why not us? Why not? Let's play and see what happens, kind of thing. But you come off a game against Houston. You've got UCLA on the other side, and UCLA is going to be a little bit different physically and just everything like that. So I'm just kind of curious to feel on a game, I guess, like this, for the second game of the year.
I always say that folks like you and me don't have to conform to the same standards of discipline as a coach or players where you don't get to look ahead. Because you and I, we're going to look ahead. That's what we get to do. We don't have to be in the locker room, and they treat us like that, right? There are barriers there in which they'll say things like, hey, you just don't understand what it's like to be here, and we'll acknowledge that while also saying, you better beat South Dakota. And I call this being an adult. Like, I call this being an adult game, meaning recognize that it's on the schedule, recognize that it is going to help another athletic department that you probably have never stepped foot on, never know anything about. You're going to get the W that you paid for if your team just comes out and does what they're supposed to do. But that is going to be a test of their discipline. And you know what? Alabama wasn't disciplined against Citadel last year, at least in the first half.
Yep.
Like, people forget that. Like, Citadel came out in a triple option and played like they know how to play. And Nick Saban had to go and yell at his kids to go get their heads out and go play to their abilities. And he wasn't happy because it was speaking to, their discipline, and he prides himself on discipline, as I think most football coaches do. And if Lincoln has to have that sort of a conversation with this group, it's not going to be a good look for a team that just, quite frankly, ain't as talented as Alabama. They were as talented. They did make the college football national championship game, and then they got embarrassed. And maybe you can draw a line back to how they played that first half against Citadel. So from both standpoints, from a fan standpoint, how you act, are you respectful? Do you respect somebody else's effort, if not understand it? Do you show them the proper respect from coin toss to the end of the game where you're shaking hands? Do you treat them as guests in your house while saying, hey, we're going to play a physical football game and we're going to go for a win? And then do you go about your business? Because that's what these games are for me. I get to see what people's character is made up from both sides, right? You're going to show up with your why not attitude like you should, and are you going to show up and say, hey, I'm going to give this South Dakota team the proper respect of having worked just as hard as I worked to get here today to be in a position to play this football game?
Yeah, I think when you look at FBS versus FCS, I think what's maybe lost in the shuffle a little bit is it's not exactly the same level, but it's not as far away from a lot of these programs as what some people think. I mean, big difference, because I guarantee you I can most of the playoff teams or whatever in the FCS, I can give you a handful of players that would be FBS players. The difference is they probably wanted to play earlier in their career and have that shot a little bit better. But, we bring a team with 22 less scholarship athletes, which is a game changer. That's why it's so shocking. I think when some of these FCS programs go and win a game against an FBS school, because you're playing with a lot less scholarships, and that changes how your recruiting is and whatnot. But most of the time, if it's an FCS school winning, it's a good FCS school, and it's against an FBS program that maybe is middle of the road. It's not like Oklahoma, one of the teams that's picked to be a contender, for a national title and anything like that. So I like it. I think it's an interesting barometer, measuring stick, but it's also one of those, I suppose some people compare it to like NFL preseason, where it's a little bit different of a game. And, for Oklahoma, this game's not going to matter unless they lose, right? Like for South Dakota, it's not going to matter if they lose. It really only matters if they win. That's just, for the most part, the reality of those type of matchups. And you just don't want to see, not that you want to see anybody hurt in any game, but you'd rather see it in a conference game that could decide eventually a conference title or something, versus one of these games that, win, lose, or draw. All of it together may not matter a whole lot.
100%. John Thayer, play-by-play announcer for the women's basketball team at USD, and also sideline reporter for the South Dakota Coyotes, who are going to challenge Oklahoma September 7th in Norman. Hey, John, make sure that you say hi when you come through, okay?
I'll definitely do that. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. And I also appreciate that you have figured out it's Coyotes and not Coyotes.
Okay.